I've been removing bodies from homes for 17 years. 17 years of carrying away the last physical trace of a life once lived. 17 years of stepping quietly into spaces where time has stopped, where the air hangs heavy with silence and memory. In this line of work, you learn to expect the unexpected. But what happened with Frank Delaney's remains on that gray November afternoon? That one still visits me sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn. Still keeps me awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what really happened in that house on Maple Street. The call came in around 3:15 p.m. Standard removal. Routine. Nothing special. Frank Delaney, 67 years old. Found by his neighbor after 3 days. Natural causes, the dispatcher said. Heart failure. When the heart stops pumping blood to the organs, the body shuts down in minutes. They say it's one of the more peaceful ways to go. No struggle, no pain, just a quiet surrender to the inevitable. In America, heart disease claims 697,000 lives every year. That's 1 in every 5 deaths. Frank had just become another statistic that Tuesday afternoon. I loaded my transport gurney into the van, the same rhythm I'd followed 1,000 times before. The drive to Maple Street was calm, light traffic. The radio hummed that old country tune about going home, and I remember thinking maybe I'd finish early, catch the football game with my brother Jake. When I pulled up, the house sat back from the road, surrounded by oak trees that had already surrendered their leaves. A quiet house, gray and still, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. Frank's neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, met me at the door. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling slightly as she passed me the key. "He was such a quiet man," she whispered. "Never bothered anyone. Kept to himself after his wife passed last spring." I nodded, thanked her softly, and stepped inside. The smell hit first. Not decay, thankfully, but that heavy stillness of a place where someone's been alone too long. Stale air, dust, a single coffee mug in the sink, newspapers stacked like weeks of unspoken loneliness. Frank lay on the living room couch, still in his blue flannel pajamas. That's where things started to feel different. I approached him with my standard white transport sheet, that same heavy cotton blend I've used for years. He looked peaceful, almost serene. Gray hair neatly combed, weathered hands folded across his chest like he was simply sleeping through eternity. I spread the sheet gently over him, tucking it carefully at his shoulders and feet. Professional, respectful, always. But when I turned to grab the gurney, the sheet had slipped down to his waist. I froze, no windows open, no vents blowing, no air movement at all. I walked back, pulled the sheet up again, smoothing it tight. Stepped away to position the gurney. It slipped again. My hand started to sweat inside the latex gloves. 17 years. I'd never seen fabric behave like that. Third time, I pressed the edges down hard, made sure there was no possible way it could fall, counted to 10, turned around. The sheet was bunched again, right at Frank's midsection, as if someone had yanked it down from underneath. That's when I decided to use the restraining straps. We only use those in difficult transports, uneven terrain, unstable equipment. But that day, I wrapped them tight. Whatever was happening, Frank Delaney was staying covered for the ride to Mortician Funeral Home. Loading him into the van went smoothly. Everything locked. Everything secure. The 10-minute drive to Morrison's should have been nothing special, but it wasn't. Halfway there, stopped at a red light on Commerce Street, I glanced at the rear view mirror. What I saw made my blood turn to ice water. The sheet was pressed upward, molded in the shape of a face, not just wrinkled, defined. I could make out the ridge of a nose, the hollows where eye sockets should be. It looked like someone was pressing from underneath, like Frank was trying to push through. I slammed on the brakes so hard the tires screamed against the pavement, heart pounding, hands shaking. Threw it in park, yanked open the rear doors. The sheet lay perfectly flat, smooth as glass. The straps were tight. Frank hadn't moved an inch. I just stood there for minutes that felt like hours, staring. Pressed my hand against the fabric, solid, cold, still. But I know what I saw. I know. The rest of that drive, I didn't look in the mirror again. Not once. When I arrived, everything went normally. Paperwork, transfer signatures, routine professionalism. But that night, when I got home, I saw something that still won't leave me alone. 3 deep scratches etched into the van's roof, right above where Frank's gurney had been. Fresh, jagged, too deliberate to ignore. I never told anyone, not Jake, not my wife, not the funeral director who would believe it. But sometimes, lying awake in the dark, I think about Frank Delaney, about what it means to die alone with no one to say goodbye. And I wonder, maybe some part of us refuses that final covering, that last small dignity we try to give the dead. Frank's funeral was held the next Thursday, closed casket. Only a handful of neighbors showed up. I couldn't go because, deep down, I was terrified that if I looked at that casket, I might see the lid moving too. It was 2:47 a.m. when my phone rang. That kind of call that drags you from the middle of a deep sleep and floods your vein with cold adrenaline. I'd been doing body removals for 12 years, and at first nothing about that Tuesday night in October seemed different. Samuel, we need you at 1847 Pine Ridge Drive. Natural death, woman in her 70s. I rolled out of bed, kissed my sleeping wife's forehead, and grabbed my keys. Outside, the streets of our small Wisconsin town were empty. Silent except for the hum of rain on asphalt. Streetlights reflected on puddles like ghosts flickering in silver. Pine Ridge Drive sat in the older part of town. Narrow sidewalks, houses, leaning close like they were keeping each other's secrets. Number 1847 was a tired two-story, its white paint peeling, porch sagging slightly to the left. A police cruiser idled out front, red and blue lights flashing across the wet street. Officer Martinez met me at the door. Good man. We'd worked scenes together before. "What do we have?" I asked, pulling my equipment bag from the van. "Evelyn Ross, 73. Neighbor called it in after she didn't pick up her newspaper. 2 days now." He held the door open for me, said, "Looks like she went peaceful. Found her in bed. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old coffee and lavender soap. Family photos lined the hallway. Graduations, weddings, moments frozen in time. The quiet, tender story of a life that had ended softly, unnoticed for 48 hours. Evelyn lay upstairs beneath a floral quilt, gray hair perfectly combed on the pillow, hands folded across her chest, like she'd simply decided not to wake up. When people go in their sleep like this, it's often sudden cardiac death. The heart's electrical system just stops. No warning, no struggle. In the U.S., it claims around 350,000 lives every year. "She looks peaceful," I said quietly. "Yeah," Martinez replied. "That's what I thought too." I went through the motions, checking for medical devices, jewelry, signs of trauma. Nothing unusual. Just another quiet ending to another quiet life. Getting her into the body bag took about 15 minutes. Slow, careful, respectful. I zipped it closed, secured the straps, and helped Martinez guide the stretcher down the narrow stairs. He closed the van's back doors behind me. "Drive safe, Samuel," he said. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 distinct raps. From inside the van, I froze. The key halfway to the ignition. "Did you hear that?" I called to Martinez. He frowned. "Hear what?" The rain drummed against the roof. Maybe that was it. Just rain. Or the metal contracting. Bodies shift during transport. Gas release, muscle relaxation. I've explained it 100 times to trainees. 12 years in this business teaches you not to jump at shadows. But my hands were slick with sweat as I turned the key. The funeral home was 8 miles away. Normally, I'd take Oak Street. Fewer lights, quicker drive. But that night, I stuck to the main roads, hugging the safety of street lamps and the occasional passing car. The radio played soft jazz, a mellow saxophone piece that usually calms me. Not that night. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound sharper, and every few seconds I'd find my eyes flicking to the rear-view mirror, to the still covered shape behind me. Halfway there, stopped at the red light on Elman and 4th. It happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm. Same deliberate pause between each strike coming from the back of the van. My blood went cold. I twisted in my seat, staring at the body bag. It looked still, but I swear I saw it shift, the faintest ripple, like someone was trying to move. "This isn't happening," I whispered. "This isn't real." The light turned green. A horn blared behind me. I pressed the accelerator, trying to swallow the panic rising in my throat. And that's when I heard it. A voice, muffled, distant. 2 words that froze me to the bone. "Not yet." I slammed on the brakes so hard the van skidded sideways. The sound of my own heartbeat drowned out the rain. I sat there, engine running, chest heaving, staring at the windshield but seeing nothing. Not yet. As clear as if someone were sitting right next to me. I reached for my phone to call Martinez, then stopped. What would I even say? That I heard a voice? From inside a sealed body bag? That a dead woman just told me she wasn't ready to go? There's a moment in this job, a line you never think you'll cross, where the ordinary turns into something you can't explain. And once you cross it, you never really come back. The rain kept falling. The saxophone kept playing. Everything looked normal, except for the terror clawing at my chest. I cranked the radio volume all the way up. Some classic rock station, the kind that usually feels like comfort on a long drive, but this time the music wasn't for comfort, it was armor. The sound blasted so loud it hurt my ears, and I didn't care. Anything to drown out the possibility of hearing that voice again. The rest of the drive to Morrison's felt endless. Every red light dragged out like a punishment. Every second stretched thin with dread. I kept my eyes locked straight ahead, refusing, absolutely refusing, to look in the rearview mirror. I sang along to songs I didn't even know, forcing my own voice to fill the van, because silence was worse. By the time I reached the funeral home, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely turn the key to kill the engine. Jim Morrison met me at the loading dock. We'd worked side by side for years, shared coffee, bad jokes, stories about our kids. He took one look at me and frowned. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Samuel." "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. We moved Evelyn Ross into the prep room without incident. The body bag stayed zipped, still, silent. Everything looked perfectly normal again. Jim signed the paperwork, patted me on the shoulder, and I headed home to my sleeping family, to the illusion of peace. But here's what I can't shake. What keeps me awake on nights when the rain falls too hard, drumming against the windows like restless fingers. The next morning, I looked up Evelyn Ross, read her obituary, spoke with her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, and that's when I learned the part that still haunts me. Evelyn had been scheduled for heart surgery the very day she died. A valve replacement, 90% success rate. She'd been putting it off for months, terrified of the anesthesia, terrified of not waking up. She kept saying she wasn't ready, Mrs. Patterson told me, her voice trembling. She said she needed more time. Now, every time I get a call for a natural death, especially the quiet ones, the ones where people die in their sleep, I can't help but wonder about that thin, fragile line between living and letting go. Because maybe, just maybe, our deepest fears don't die with us. Maybe they linger, whispering from places where whispers shouldn't exist, reminding us that readiness isn't something we choose, it's something that's taken from us. And maybe the real horror isn't what waits for us after death. Maybe it's the thought that some part of us never really lets go, so when the rain falls hard, like it did that Tuesday in October, I still turn my radio up, loud enough to drown out the voices that might be calling from the back of my van. Most people think funeral homes are places of peace, quiet sanctuaries where grief settles like dust, and the dead rest undisturbed. But after 15 years working at Riverside Memorial, I can tell you that's only half true. The quiet part, yes, but the resting, sometimes I'm not so sure anyone really rests here at all. My name is Joseph McCall, and I've carried more bodies than I can count. But there's one removal, one night, that changed everything. Changed how I walk through these halls, how I listen to silence, how I face what I can't see, but know is there. It began with Howard Green, a man who seemed determined not to leave his 2-story colonial on Sycamore Street, even after his heart had other plans. The strange thing started small. They always do. Little moments you brush off, until they pile up like autumn leaves, too many to ignore. Footsteps echoing down empty hallways when I'm the only one on shift. The faint whisper of fabric brushing against the walls where no one walks. Lights flickering in the prep rooms. The same lights I know I turned off. My assistant, Bobby Martinez, would catch my eye after those moments. That look that says, "You heard that too, right?" And I always had. But it was the figure in the viewing room that made me realize these weren't just creaks and shadows, that this building, this job, was holding something it shouldn't. It was a Thursday evening. I was doing my final walkthrough when I saw her, an elderly woman in a navy blue dress, standing beside the Hartwell family's arrangements, perfectly still, head bowed, hands clasped. I assumed she was a late visitor who'd slipped in after hours. "Ma'am," I called softly, "we're actually closed for the evening." She didn't respond, didn't move. I walked closer, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet designed to swallow sound and sorrow. But when I reached the spot where she stood, she was gone, just gone. No sound of footsteps, no rustle of fabric, no door closing. Only the lingering scent of old roses and something else. Something sharp and damp, like rain on concrete. I searched every corner, every hallway. The building was locked tight. Security footage later showed only me, walking through empty rooms, talking to no one. Bobby found me 20 minutes later, still standing in the same spot. He grinned nervously. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. Then his smile faded. Wait, did you? I told him everything, expected him to laugh or tell me to get some sleep. Instead, his face went pale. Navy blue dress, he asked quietly. Gray hair, tied in a bun. The chill that crawled down my spine had nothing to do with the air conditioning. You've seen her too. 3 times, Bobby whispered. Always in that same spot, always during the Hartwell viewing. Mrs. Hartwell's mother. She died in that dress 15 years ago. That night, I looked it up. And he was right. After that, Bobby started leaving his car keys by the door before closing time, just in case we ever needed to leave quickly. I thought he was being paranoid, until the night he called me at 2:17 a.m. Joseph, you need to come to the funeral home. Now, his voice was shaking. I found him sitting in the parking lot, engine running, hands trembling as he lit his 3rd cigarette. I came back for my wallet, he said, eyes darting toward the building. Left it in the prep room, but when I unlocked the door, I heard someone calling my name from upstairs. He swallowed hard. A woman's voice, he said. She kept saying, Bobby, help me, I can't find the way. He looked at me, eyes wide, hollow. I know every voice that belongs in this building, Joseph. That wasn't one of them. Maybe someone got locked in. I started. I checked, he cut me off. Every room, every hallway, the building was empty. His voice broke, but the voice kept moving, room to room, like she was lost. Bobby didn't come back to work the next day or the day after. When he finally did, he handed me his resignation. Said his wife had been having nightmares about a woman in a navy blue dress standing at the foot of their bed. That's when Howard Green entered the picture. The call came on a foggy October morning. Natural death, dispatch said. Neighbor found him at the bottom of his stairs. Apparently fell during a heart attack. Howard was a big man, 6'2", maybe 250 pounds, the kind of removal that takes planning, precision, strength. Bobby's replacement was a young guy named Carl Rodriguez. Eager, strong, still naive to the weight this work carries. Together, we loaded Howard onto the stretcher and began carefully navigating the narrow staircase. But from the moment we stepped inside that house, something felt wrong. Not cold, not dark, just heavy. The kind of heaviness that presses on your chest right before a thunderstorm breaks. Halfway down the stairs, the stretcher suddenly felt impossibly heavy. What had been a manageable 2-man carry now felt like trying to lift a car. Carl's face flushed red with effort. "What the hell?" he gasped. And that's when I felt it. Hands, not grabbing, but pressing down on my shoulders. Firm, relentless. The pressure was so real, I actually turned around, expecting to see someone behind me. But there was no one. The staircase was empty, yet the weight kept growing, crushing, until my knees started to buckle. Carl was making noises I'd never heard a person make. Not quite crying, not quite choking. The stretcher felt like it was being pushed into the floor, like invisible hands were forcing Howard to stay. "Howard," I said out loud, feeling foolish but desperate. "We're here to help you. You can't stay." And just like that, the pressure vanished, the weight lifted, the air cleared. The stretcher felt light again, almost weightless. We rushed down the remaining steps, gasping for breath, like we'd just surfaced from deep water. That was the night I realized something. The dead may rest, but sometimes they don't rest here. Sometimes they linger, caught between wanting to leave and refusing to go. And those are the moments that remind me, this job isn't just about the bodies we move. It's about the ones who don't want to be moved at all. When we reached the bottom, I turned to look back up those stairs, and for just a single heartbeat, the kind that stretches forever, I saw him, a massive silhouette standing motionless at the top of the staircase, watching us. The dim light caught the edge of his frame, broad shoulders still as stone, and in that instant, the air turned cold enough to taste. Carl saw him too. I could hear it in the tremor of his whisper. "Mr. McCall, was that?" The figure didn't wave. He didn't move toward us. He simply lifted a hand, palm out, like he was telling us to stop. Then, without a sound, he was gone. We didn't speak after that. Not a single word. We loaded Howard into the van faster than I thought humanly possible, every motion silent and mechanical, the kind of silence that feels alive. On the drive away from Sycamore Street, Carl's hand suddenly clamped onto my arm. "Look," he breathed, and there, in the second-story window of Howard's dark house, a shadow drifted across the glass, back and forth, back and forth, like someone pacing, like someone who still couldn't find their way out. Now, when I walk through Riverside Memorial, after hours, I always say hello to the empty rooms. Not because I believe in ghosts. I honestly don't know what I believe anymore. But because I've learned something important. Some presences don't need permission to exist. They just do. And when something that shouldn't exist decides to notice you, the smartest thing you can do is notice it back. Carl lasted 2 weeks after that. He said he kept dreaming about endless stairs, steps that climbed forever, and voices calling to him from somewhere at the top. I didn't blame him for leaving. This work, this kind of work, it's not for everyone. But here's what keeps me awake at night. Sometimes, when the insomnia wins, I drive past Howard Green's old house just to check, and every single time without fail, there's a faint light moving from room to room on the second floor, drifting, wandering, searching. The power company says that house hasn't had electricity for 6 months. So, let me ask you something. When you're home alone at night and the house creaks, when you catch that flicker of movement in the corner of your eye, are you absolutely sure you're alone? Because after what I've seen, I'm not sure any of us ever truly are. You learn to trust your mirrors in this business. 23 years of transporting the dead will teach you that. You start using your peripheral vision as much as your hands on the wheel. You check those mirrors not just for traffic, but for movement, for shifts, for anything that shouldn't be there. Because there are a dozen ways a body can come loose during transport, and only one way for your sanity to survive it. That's why I noticed her immediately. My name is Brian Lowe, and I've been removing bodies from nursing homes since before most people even understood what Alzheimer's really was. Back then, we just called it senility, like the mind had wandered off down some quiet road and forgotten its way home. But now, we know better. We know it's a disease that literally eats holes in the brain. Memory first, then personality, then the very mechanisms that keep you alive. 6 million Americans fading piece by piece until there's nothing left but a body that's forgotten how to breathe. Caroline Foster was one of those people. A name on a chart, a story cut short. The call came in at 4:17 p.m. Gray skies, cold wind, a Thursday in March. Sunset Manor Nursing Home, bed 12. Lateral progression. That's the phrase they use when a brain finally forgets how to tell a heart to keep beating. I'd picked up her roommate just 6 months before. These places, they have a rhythm, a conveyor belt of quiet departures that you learn not to think too deeply about. The air inside smelled like disinfectant, sharp and chemical. But underneath it lingered that sweet, heavy scent of bodies slowing down. It's the kind of smell that gets under your skin. Caroline lay in a narrow bed by the window, tiny, fragile, 91 years old, though Alzheimer's has a cruel way of aging a person beyond the calendar. Her gray hair had been brushed neatly, a final act of kindness from a nurse who believed that dignity shouldn't end when breathing does. Her hands, paper-thin, spotted, trembling in stillness, were folded across her chest. She was talking about going home right up until yesterday, said Nurse Rodriguez, a thick-set woman with soft eyes that had seen too much. She kept asking when her daughter was coming to pick her up. I asked if the daughter visited often. The nurse hesitated. Her daughter died in a car accident 30 years ago. Caroline never remembered. That's the cruelest trick of Alzheimer's. It sometimes spares the memories that hurt the most. Getting Caroline onto the stretcher took about 10 minutes. Identify, photograph, secure routine steps, the ritual of the trade. She couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds. Lifting her felt like moving a collection of bird bones wrapped in linen, so light, so breakable. I wheeled her through the hallways, past the day room where her residents stared at a television no one understood, past the dining area with untouched trays of pureed food waiting for mouths that had forgotten how to chew. The automatic doors sighed open, and the cold gray light washed over everything. My van waited by the loading dock like a silent confession booth. Loading her took another 15 minutes. Lock the stretcher, check the restraints, close the doors. Passenger number 847. The number meant nothing. but it's one you never forget. The drive to Riverside Memorial usually takes 22 minutes. I knew every street, every stoplight, every pothole. But that day, 3 minutes into the drive, something shifted in my side mirror. Caroline was sitting up, not lying flat, not restrained as I'd left her, sitting upright, like a passenger just quietly enjoying the ride. Her profile was clear, the neat gray hair, the slope of her shoulders, the gentle turn of her head, as if she were watching the world pass by her window. My hands tightened around the steering wheel until the leather creaked. Bodies don't sit up, not like that. Rigor mortis stiffens joints. It doesn't animate them. I risked a glance at the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just shadows. But in the side mirror, she was still there, sitting, watching. I pulled over on Cedar Street, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the rain. Threw the van into park, stepped out, and yanked open the rear doors. Caroline lay flat, exactly as I'd left her, straps tight, motionless. I checked at everything twice, the straps, the locks, the positioning. Perfect, impeccable. And yet, back in the driver's seat, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a reflection, a trick of the light. Maybe my tired brain playing games. I started driving again. 2 minutes later, there she was, upright again, head turned toward the window like she was admiring the view. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and just sat there. 5 minutes, maybe more. Engine running, heart pounding. And through the mirror she sat patiently, quiet, peaceful, as if she knew exactly where she was going. But when I turned to look, the van was empty except for the covered form. The rest of the drive, I didn't look back, didn't dare. Kept my eyes fixed on the road, the music from the radio barely masking the faint rustle from the back, the whisper of fabric, the soft shift of vinyl, like someone adjusting in their seat. By the time I reached the funeral home, my shirt was clinging to me with sweat, despite the cold March air. I backed the van up to the loading dock with mechanical precision, then just sat there, breathing, gathering enough courage to open the doors. When I finally did, Caroline lay motionless, just as she should. But then I saw it, a handprint on the inside of the rear window, 5 fingers, a perfect palm pressed against the cool glass, so detailed I could see the ridges. It was inside, on her side. I stared as the edges began to fade, melting into the condensation, until all that remained was a faint ghost of moisture. I tried to reason it away. Maybe I'd touched it earlier, maybe a temperature difference, maybe. But I knew my own hands, and that print was smaller, more delicate. The kind of hand that had once held a daughter's and never let go. Jim Foster helped me unload her. Didn't say a word, but I saw his eyes flicker toward that window. By then the handprint had vanished. That night, I drove home a different way. Avoided Cedar Street. Avoided that gas station. Avoided thinking too hard about what I'd seen in that mirror. But sometimes, late at night, When I'm back behind the wheel and the rain starts to fall, I find myself wondering about the passengers we carry, the ones who aren't quite ready to reach their destination. Because here's what haunts me most. When I saw Caroline sitting there in that mirror, she didn't look lost. She didn't look confused. She looked present, alive, like the disease that had devoured her for a decade had finally let go, just long enough for her to find her way home. And if that's true, if some part of us lingers, even after the body forgets how to live, then I have to ask you, when your time comes and you're in the back of that van, taking your final ride, will you lie still like you're supposed to? Or will you sit up just once and watch through the window as the world you're leaving drifts by, waiting to see where this road truly leads?